Hi there. Ever since I heard of the concept of skill ranks in Discords, I've had kind of mixed feelings on it. At first I was extremely positive because it felt like an actual ranking system could encourage me to actually really try hard on something for once. As I grew in my understanding of the game though, it felt like more of an arbitrary placement of my skill level. If you've experienced what I'm talking about here, it can feel very demoralizing to have your skill level that you may think is better or worse depending, placed as an analog compared to some of your peers. So this kind of begs the question, can art be competitive? Or rather, should it be competitive in the first place? Well, it's worth noting that art is basically an expression of the human mind, emotions, and then combining everything that's in your head and heart into some sort of medium in a way that actually shows how you express yourself. If you try to find a way to make that competitive in some form, it can actively eat away at some of the ways that you process emotion in the first place, and therefore harm the way that you make art going forward. I've got some general points here too. Mostly, comparison is the thief of joy. If you're going to be looking at other people's work as purely a learning lesson, every single one of them, that just takes tons out of you, man. It basically ends up turning it into some sort of job. Kind of ties in nicely with the point that your ego can basically take over, and it can really make something not as fun anymore. But with that in mind, you can learn a lot from other people's work. If you meticulously take apart what's going where, how something is being done in a specific scenario, what you can learn could be a lot. It could be something as simple as being aware of a new mod that is completely fine with your playstyle, or maybe there was just a small little piece in the corner of a building that you really appreciate the detail of that you would not have known about before. All these things are good to consider, but at the bottom line, consider this. If you're comparing yourself with others, and specifically your works with others, do your peers make creations with the same objective in mind that you do? Let me expand on this a little bit. Say you are really, really good at making some sort of realistic building. You love making theme parks almost to scale, 1-to-1, seeing how everything comes together in a way that is processed in the digital world that looks exactly like you've experienced in real life. That can be really fulfilling. Some people just think of a fantastical idea, pull it off with execution that is just mind-blowing, and the creativity on display in some of those creations is stunning, to say the least. And then we have potentially creators that are focused on making the best coasters or the best experiences. Perhaps the idea here is that you could be working on a coaster yourself, but you don't quite have the experience to compare with something that someone can agonize for tens of hours over. And sometimes that's okay. You have to recognize that we all come from different skill levels. We just don't necessarily have to categorize them, I guess. But back to the main point. Each of these facets of the game, which I do plan on covering in a future video of itself, they only ever focus on accomplishing something specific. It gets even more confusing when you add in the layer of potentially realism that is slated to something very hyper-specific. So if someone is doing a recreation of something, the only objective metric that they're working with here is the thing that they're referencing. They don't care about what anyone else is doing, they're just doing something as a recreation for fun. And it makes them happy. Or maybe you're making an active volcano-style park, a la Roller Coaster Tycoon, one of those scenarios, and you want it to be as convincing as possible as like a really sick volcano set piece with a whole bunch of coasters and flat rides going everywhere. Basically just chaos. Not everyone's going to be working with that same set, but you can learn a lot from how somebody got through that creative process from starting point and idea to ending creation and park download. There is especially something to learn when it comes to roller coaster shaping and how people make realistic designs. Everything from the philosophy of how long a ride is supposed to be in the first place to how it would actually exist in the real world. For instance, not every coaster needs to go over 200 feet, but because it's Planet Coaster, sometimes we just let it happen anyway if we aren't any the wiser. Or at what point do you draw the line on realism and say, hey, maybe a lift motor isn't necessary? Or do I really need the catwalk at the very top of the lift hill? Or all these maintenance checks that go in a coaster footprint? Or maybe you don't care and you just want to make something fun. Like, the objective behind all of these is so wildly different that if you were to compare your works with any of these, it wouldn't be useful in any way, shape, or form. So I do think it's much more helpful to learn from other people's work than it is to compare yourself with them. But that is admittedly very difficult in a game that you spend so much time building one thing in, especially if that thing happens to be a park that you've been working on since the start of the game's official development. So with that all said, what is the purpose of a Discord skill ranking? Now, we're not talking about participation rules like maybe Club Wix might have. There are a couple other Discords I'm a part of that do the same thing, where basically the more you talk in a chat or channel or Discord, the more quote-unquote experience you get, and this gives you a role which places you above others that are not as active as you are. I can see that as a way to encourage users to get interested in the server, but by the same token, I don't think it's necessarily the most helpful thing in the world to do for a Discord. Certainly you don't need a hierarchy based on how often you spend time or engage in a server, but this is neither here nor there. We're talking about skill ranking here. Is the time, effort, and stress to get ranked worth it to you? Well, you have to contend with a couple things. Sometimes if you're going to get ranked in a Discord that's large enough, they'll have rigid rules that you have to abide by in order to have your stuff looked at in any serious way. If you have an expansive workshop, they might not necessarily give you a high rank if they have only just seen you in the Discord and they haven't spent a whole lot of time actually engaging with you as a creator or otherwise. So it may take a little bit before you get some sort of rank like this. And the rules could mean that even though you have a built-up library or repertoire of items that you frequently use in your builds, that could be banned or locked away if you were to make something for a challenge which would end up helping you get a higher rank in the end. So little details like I typically make, like my little fire hydrants, I have a Jersey barrier in the workshop, some warning signs. Those would categorically be against the rules, even though they are very complicated little clusters of objects that I use all the time. Remember, some of these things have deadlines too. So if you're strapped for time and you really need the process to be easy, simple, without any time crunch, then I wouldn't really recommend doing anything with a deadline attached to it. Sometimes challenges can help push you in a good direction. Other times it can just be more stress and more of a headache than it's worth. You also have forced comparison when there are any challenges that are more competitions. So at the very end, if you don't have the right attitude about it and you struggle with a massive ego, I know I do sometimes, then it can feel like you're poised to be negative against other people's work when yours is being compared almost directly up against another's. But like I mentioned earlier, anything like this is a huge growth opportunity, and you get to learn a lot about yourself, as well as new build styles and tricks that you previously didn't get to know. This goes for virtually anything that you do in game though. So I'm not going to limit it to just challenges and stuff like this, but because you'll push yourself towards being the best version of yourself in this one moment for one piece of art, it can mean that you learn a lot, whereas otherwise you might not have. It is worth noting though, nobody is truly objective when they are grading things, so they could bias towards or against your works, and they may not be assessing the objective of what you're trying to accomplish as well as you might, or as well as the general public might. Something to keep in mind. Worth noting, though, is that usually they come with sets of criticism, and you can take or leave any criticism that you get towards artistic pieces. Criticizing art has always been a thing, but it feels like there's something a little bit more substantial when it comes to Planet Coaster creations, especially when there are very clear mistakes that some people make that could be easily avoided. It's always good in those scenarios to show what you can do to make things better, rather than to just say something is bad and then move on. Besides skill rankings, they're really just a way to gauge community involvement, and that can matter to you. So if the skill rank that you're going for is more about the community and just wanting a nice, cute little badge next to your name, and you think that the time and effort put in to achieve that ranking is helpful, then go for it. If you like the server, don't let me tell you otherwise. However, I want to kind of conclude with a couple thoughts here. Your skill as a creator cannot be compared to others, and it shouldn't. Your creative works should be celebrated through their faults, while learning from mistakes on the way. Quote unquote, doing better next time is the healthy key to being a fine artist. And there's never shame in walking away from something you thought could be better, but you need time away from. I find this for a lot of my projects, actually. If I've been working on something for long enough, I find I just end up losing tons of patience with it, and if I were to finish it in a time period of like 20 or 30 hours or just stuck through it, I wouldn't be happy with the final product, no matter what it is, which is honestly really strange. I'm sure there's something in psychology to narrow down what that is technically called, but there's enough stress in the world that you don't need Planet Coaster to become a second job for you. If there's any advice that I could give to anyone, do yourself a favor and don't take it so seriously. And I am saying some of this as projection. I need to wisen up sometimes and just focus on my project sometimes. The stellar creations of the community often make me feel almost unworthy to be counted among my peers as a creator. But it's important to remember that nobody will be more critical of an artist's work than the artist themselves. So, taking that step back, appreciating sometimes what you've made in the past, what made it good, what lessons you've learned since then, can be a way to see just how far you've come. That's all that matters in the long run. If you feel like you've been actually making progress, you love what you're making, then that's you using the game for its intended effect. I want to thank you very much for listening to this. I've had some very complicated thoughts on this subject for a while. I personally view skill rankings as more reductive than productive because of all of the reasons I mentioned. I just think that the whole conversation is much more nuanced than a lot of people take, and some larger discords have skill rankings, which I don't know that I'm totally on board with quite yet. I mean, it might just be their way of expression, and that's okay. Whether you like or don't like skill ranks and discords, I do urge you, keep on building and creating amazing things. Have a good one. That's an order. Follow it, Kid Soldier.